This lesson is on the Hetfieldian mode. Now, what are you going to do when you have a riff and it's got this chord and that chord, which is the same as the 6th fret, in it? What key are we in? So there's a lot of metallica riffs that James plays that, and we need to figure out what mode or what scale we're in. If we use E, F, G, and A, we would be in E Phrygian. But as soon as we use that B flat and we put a power chord on that flat 5, we can't just play in one major key. That's a borrowed chord or a modulation, or maybe it's a hybrid of 2 scales. That's what the Hetfieldian mode is. It's a mixture of E Locrian with E Phrygian. Let me show you a couple thoughts on that really fast, okay? So if I was in the key of E Phrygian, that would all work. But if I was in the key of E Locrian, these are the 2 most probable scales that are related that you would mix to be able to get. So a lot of these riffs, you know, there's a lot of those kind of riffs, like all these riffs are using an E power chord, a G, a A, and a B flat. Now, one way you could look at it is taking an E blues scale and you could, you know, mix that with a G blues, and you could put all 2 of those blues scales together. Now, what's real interesting is if we took all the notes of E, Locrian, and Phrygian and put them together, we could use that as a scale that would work for where they're just moving around a lot, and you want to make sure that you've got all the right notes. So what's really interesting is if you looked at the notes of a G, like a G boogie pattern, G MixoDorian, if we put all that and we looked at it and we based it around the E, it has all the notes. So basically, the Hetfieldian mode, the mode that you should be playing over all these old school heavy metal thrash riffs when you've got the B flat and the A and the G and the F in it, is essentially G MixoDorian blues. Now what's funny is there aren't a lot of solos where people might go into that G position and play like a G blues scale and maybe mix that with the MixoDorian blues. But there is one where it's like in the Shorter Straw solo. I don't want to play it because they're gonna probably be like, oh, that's exactly like Shorter Straw. I think I'm faking it or whatever. So essentially, if you took the notes of a G boogie pattern, you will find all the notes. So it's almost like a reverse blues idea in a weird sense. If you could start learning to do this kind of over, but base it on this note. It's basically could work, right? So instead of just over this stuff, just playing E minor in blues or playing an E minor scale, we'd say like, oh, it's bad. It doesn't have the F note and the B flat that we need. So we could learn to just basically solo Okay, so it's basically E PhrygiLocrian is your E Hetfieldian mode. Look at all the chords in the key of E Phrygian, which is C major, and look at all the chords in the key of E Locrian, which is F major, and you'll see that you're really just turning the dial to the subdominant key there, 1 over. And so you're playing in the key of C major and in the key of F major at the same time, which essentially is you're playing in the key of A minor and you're playing in the key of D minor at the same time. I'm calling that because an E Locrian mode is the same thing as F major, and an E Phrygian mode is the same thing as C major or A minor, so we could think of those But if we looked at it from the G's perspective, E Locrian ends up being G Dorian, and E Phrygian ends up being G MixoDorian. So all those notes will work when we looked at that. And now when we're playing thrash, we can think of maybe like all these old G MixoDorian blues licks. And the other thing, like I said, is just find a way to mix your two blues scales, and that would be an easy out as well. So that's the scale that you're finding in thrash when you're playing in E Phrygian, but you're always adding in that B flat note. Okay, regarding the E Hetfieldian mode, essentially what this is E PhrygiLocrian. We're going to mix E Locrian and E Phrygian. That's the only way you're going to see all these chords. E, F, G, A, B flat, C, D. If we have a riff, and there's thousands of them, I'll give you an example. Or... even the one about the sand guy or whatever is like and any of these riffs where you're using these notes. Alright, you get the idea. So many of those great old riffs are using those chords, and you can't just solo in E minor. E minor doesn't have the F. E minor doesn't have the B flat in there. So what most people do is over those kind of riffs, people are just going to solo in E minor blues scale, and you could definitely do that. But let's talk about other scales you might want to consider. So let's look at the board for a second here. If we look at the E Hetfieldian mode, what this is E Phrygian plus E Locrian. That's why I call it PhrygiLocrian. But that's the Hetfieldian mode. Let's look really quick. If we were in, say, the key of E Phrygian is the same as the key of C major, and it's also the key of A minor. So if you know the chords that are in C major or A minor, easier than the chords that are in E Phrygian, that would be helpful. Now, let's just look at power chords. I'll write it as a 5. E Phrygian is E5, F5, G5, A5. Here it has a B flat with a, it has a B with a flat 5. So this one is not a power chord in the key of C, so we can't use that one there. But we do have a C5 and a D5. Those are all the chords in E Phrygian. Now, if I look at all the chords in E Locrian, the Locrian mode is the 7th mode in the key of F major. So if you know the chords that are in the key of F major, which is also the same as the key of D minor, all of those chords, we'll put those here. The first one would be E, it would be a E diminished chord, so we don't need that one. But we do have an F5, we have a G5, we have an A5, and now here in this key, we do have a B flat 5. This is actually a B flat note power chord, not a B flat with a flat, not a B with a flat 5, whatever. So here you have a C5 and a D5, and then those would be all of the chords in the key of F major or E Locrian. So if we put all of these chords together, we have E5, F5, G5, A5, here's your B flat 5, your C5, and your D5. So then all of the thrash riffs that use these chords you can play a scale that's a polytonal scale where you're playing in 2 keys at one time. This happens all the time. You might play in 1 key and then you choose what they call the dominant key, a key that's a 5th above it, or the subdominant key, a key that's a 4th above it or a 5th below it. And those are the 2 most similar keys. So we can borrow a chord from either of those keys to put into whatever key we're in. So my premise of the Hetfieldian mode, my whole idea is that if you took the key of F and you took the key of C major and you put all those notes combined, that's how you're going to be able to play solos over that. So rather than just playing E minor blues, which you know works and is really great, I'm thinking try to play in E Phrygian and also try to play in E Locrian and put those together. So I don't know why I'm staying on the A. But if you put all those together, now an easy way for you to do that, besides trying to think of 2 scales at once, and you could think just F, mix that with C, and put those together. You'd be able to find all the notes that you need. Now, one of the only solos I know where easy way to look at this too is play an E minor pentatonic scale, mix those notes with a G minor pentatonic, and if you kind of figure out where those all are at in maybe one position, you'll get from E minor pentatonic, from G minor pentatonic, from both, from E minor pentatonic, from G minor pentatonic, from E minor pentatonic, from G minor pentatonic has that note. The C note is in a G minor pentatonic, and your D note is in E minor pentatonic. So one thing you could do is play like E minor pentatonic and G minor pentatonic. Like an Eddie Van Halen, Randy Rhoads style of playing, where you put the notes of both pentatonic scales together. Now, one of the only solos I know that people are kind of playing in G minor pentatonic over those kind of riffs is Short of Straw. Kirk's like, it's a lot of wah, right? So he's actually doing that, and if you listen to the way that sounds, it's kind of interesting to do that. So the whole premise is when you're playing all those old thrash riffs that are using the B flat, you make sure that your scales that you play over that have all the notes of the chords in there, especially if the chords are moving along really fast like that. You can't really go and modulate to those other chords. You have to kind of connect them together. So basically, the E Hetfieldian mode will give you scales that will fit for that. And again, what are those scales? It's E Phrygian mixed with E Locrian. I could call it E Hetfieldian, but it's really it could be called E Mustanian, couldn't it? Or any of those old riffs like, right? Or even Tony doesn't play that there, but you get the idea. All those real heavy riffs are not in one key, and so they're basically in the key of C major and F major, or they're in the key of A minor and D minor combined, or they're in the key of E Phrygian or E Locrian together, E PhrygiLocrian. So if you want to play modal, you could use those 2 modes combined, or you could simply think of 2 pentatonic scales together, E minor pentatonic and G minor pentatonic. And what's really also interesting is if you looked at, say, a G boogie pattern, all of those notes that you find in those boogies, if you base that G boogie pattern and you base it around the E note, you're going to get all of those notes. Isn't that pretty interesting? So if you knew a lot of these old blues rock and roll kind of licks like that, those licks, sorry, bad riff, think of a better riff like that. Over that, I could just kind of think interesting, your G boogie woogie pattern is all the notes. Now it's isn't that kind of funny how those are all the same notes? So you could look at the major sixth of your MixoDorian blues scale, and that would also be the Hetfieldian mode. If we take a quick look here again at the board, the key of C major would relate to G MixoLydian, and the key of F major would relate to G Dorian. So the Hetfieldian mode, the PhrygiLocrian mode, this actually could be looked at as a G MixoDorian. I don't know if you're seeing that on the board. I'll put it lower. G MixoDorian. G MixoDorian is the same. G MixoDorian is the same as E Phrygian and Locrian together, which is what I'm calling the Hetfieldian mode, but it's basically combining C major and F major. Relating it to E, though, since we're playing over E chords all the time, we are going to say we're an E Phrygian and an E Locrian at the same time, and when we look at all those notes, it makes it the same as the notes you'd use in a G blues for G MixoDorian blues. So, when you're playing, quick recap, when you're playing over all these thrash riffs that have, to do that, you could play licks that you know in Phrygian or Locrian, maybe mix it, and that's how you play modes. Or you could just play E minor pentatonic, E minor blues, but now I'm saying mix that with G minor pentatonic, and now put that with E minor blues, and now put that, right? So you could almost hear that Dorian blues out of it. So the other way I was looking at it is thinking about your G boogie pattern. Go to that major six, and those are kind of three solid ways. You could look at G MixoDorian blues. So go up a minor third from the E, and you could play that blues on all those notes would work. Or you mix E minor pentatonic and G minor pentatonic. Those will give you all the right notes. Or you mix E Phrygian and E Locrian. That, my friends, is the E Hetfieldian mode.